Hello, I am Janja Ravnikar from CIOFF Slovenia, and for this year's CIOFF Marathon, we will introduce you the Slovenian tradition of bell-chiming. The last folklore choreography, which my father, Professor Dr. Bruno Ravnikar, did in his life, and was introduced the first time on the stage last year, also including bell-chiming. For many years, we thought that this was the Slovenian specialty, but Dr. Mojca Kovacic, who is today with me here, refuted this. Mrs. Mojca is the head of Slovenian Institute of Ethnomusicology by ZRC SAZU, and in 2009 she obtained her PhD in bell-chiming. With us is also a bell expert and passionate bell-chimer, Dominik Malovrh. And we are standing in the front of church in the village Polhov Gradac, and I hope that we will climb its bell tower. And now I will leave you to Mrs. Mojca and Mr. Dominik to explain you this interesting tradition.
Church bell is a musical instrument. It fits into the group of percussion instruments because we get the sound out of it by striking it. Church bells are a very important part of people's everyday. They wake up the people in the morning, at noon they tell them that it's time for a break, and in the evening they tell them that the night is appearing and that it's time to leave the work and prepare for sleep. Church bells also invite people to the holy masses. They tell to the people when somebody dies in the village. They tell to the people if there is a danger coming, and so on. That things made the people very connected to the bells. With that, the people started adding to the bells a human properties. For example, they said that the bell is sadly crying when somebody died. They said that the bell is happily singing when the holiday was coming. And they also said that, for example, bells breaking clouds during the storms. Church bells are made out of bronze and steel. They are made by a complex process of planing and casting. If it's done correctly, the bell sings with a minor chord from the note, which is the striking note of the bell. The main tones are then an octave above the minor chord and octave below the minor chord. As any other musical instrument, the bell also needs a variety of complex and important equipment that it could sing properly. The most important part of bell's equipment is clapper. The people also gave this clapper the name tongue because it actually is a tongue of the bell. If it's made correctly, it gives to the bell a nice sound, so it talks nicely. And if it's not correctly made, the bell sounds not very nice. The next part of equipment is a yoke. It is a thing above the bell, this wooden thing above the bell. And in Slovenia, the bell is fitted on the yoke and it is mounted on the construction with the ball bearings so the bell can swing. nowadays we see a variety of electronic devices with the bells. For example, here we can see a striking hammer. This thing strikes every 15 minutes to tell the people what the time is. And also a lot of electric motors that drive the bell and swing it so it starts ringing. In the days before Easter, when the bells are tied and they are not ringing, we'll replace the bell ringing with this ratchet. In the past, where clocks and watches were very expensive, not anyone could buy it. And in the village, at least one church had this large mechanical clock, which drove the clock hands on the tower and struck the bells every 15 minutes. That is how these mechanical contraptions taught to the people what the time is. And it worked like so. At the end of the day, the church keeper had to come in the tower and wind this clock with this, and he had to do every single day. Nowadays, in many church towers, these mechanical clocks only stay. They are not a thing anymore, they don't work anymore. Because it's mechanic and the things in the tower are replaced by electronics. Here in Polhov Gradac we just have it connected to these small bells, so the people that come into the tower can even imagine how this massive contraption with all the gears actually worked back then in the past.
So bell chiming in Slovenia is called pritrkavanje, and it's a musical practice, very widespread in Slovenia, living tradition, and it consists of different rhythmical patterns. So the most common and usual practice is that in the bell tower there are as many as bells, as many bell chimers. So the most ideal and also the most common in Slovenia is that there are so many chimers as bells in the bell tower. So each chimer is holding the clapper of the bell and striking its rhythmical patterns to the rim of the bell. But each chimer has its own role. So for example, the one chimer strikes the main strikes, the next chimer is striking responding strikes, and the third chimer, if you have three bells, is striking in between. We say in Slovenian language gostenje, which means thickening, so he's thickening the melody, so he's kind of ornamentating the melody so it's much thicker or nicer. The two main types of bell chiming tunes are divided in flying tunes and stationary tunes. When we speak about flying tunes, that means that one of the bells, usually the big bell, is flying. That means it's swinging, either mechanically, either they swing it by hand or they do it electronically. And on the other bells, bell chimers are chiming bell chiming tunes. In stationary way of bell chiming, all the bells are fixed and the chimers are chiming. Usually in churches in Slovenia there are 3 bells, and this is the most common practice, to chime on 3 bells. But in the times of the First and the Second World War, many bells were withdrawn from churches, and some of churches restored and bought new bells, and some of them not. But the special tradition developed also because of that, because of lack of the bells. Sometimes bell chimers were replacing bells with iron objects in the bells, so they continued the tradition of bell chiming. And sometimes they used hammers to produce different intonations, different tones on the different part of the bell. There are not as many as bell chimers, so less chimers are playing on more bells. For example, we can find also 1 chimer performing on 3 bells. In one case, I also found the tradition of 1 chimer chiming on 3 bells but using 4 clappers, because in the First World War the 4th bell was withdrawn, and the tradition of performing bell chiming on 4 bells was preserved in that way that he just added 1 more clapper inside the bell. Because clappers are very heavy, bell chimers also developed a system to ease the clappers, so they have different system of levers, and that is why we can say that today, also because gender and generational roles are different today, but also because clappers are lighter, children and also women can perform bell chiming. Bell chiming in Slovenia really developed from 80s of 20th century onwards, because there was an association taking care of bell chiming gatherings. So bell chimers are still gathering throughout Slovenia. They meet, they exchange knowledge, they show to each other their skills, and also it is very interesting for younger generation to also to show to other people what kind of musical practice is this. So today we can find also more complex melodies that bell-chimers developed. They also use musical notation. They sometimes use some knowledge from music schools and so on, but also perform traditional melodies that were transmitted from generation to generation. In different parts of the world, or especially in Europe, where I did some fieldwork, they also play different kind of melodies on bells, and they also perform bell chiming. For example, in the Rhineland, in Germany, I found the same practice as bell chiming in Slovenia, also in Croatia, in some parts of Italy. It is very special that in Slovenia it's so much developed, and it's still such a big and living tradition, and very widespread also among young generation. That is why we also proposed bell chiming to be inscripted in the national list of intangible heritage, which is first step before going to UNESCO list, and we really hope that we will get support of the Ministry of Culture to inscribe this living tradition and very precious tradition to the UNESCO list of intangible heritage.